Hail me, the Pope of. See, I promised myself I was going to be accountable here, so I got to go on camera. Nope. Okay, let's see. This is going to be quick. So, I got to get me a computer chair. I'm sitting on the edge of my bed and I'm really tall, so I'm really fidgety, like Nick Quaint. Okay, so I'm just going to make a quick argument that dispensationalism is wrong, and only through dispensational can you read Matthew 25 is not talking about the church. Let me pull it up. See, if I'm on camera, I can't be a jerk. That's the idea here. Okay. So I'm just going to make, this is my first attempt to change Rebekah's mind. And see the problem. So like theologically, like conceptually here, I just don't think it's a good idea to read the Bible dispensationally because of where that leads. It essentially is going to, and it's difficult because there's so many different versions of dispensationalism. So I'm not saying there isn't dispensations. I'm a New Covenant Christian. I read, I'm not Hebrew roots. Well, see, they have different views too. We're obviously in the New Covenant, okay? Like that is what the salvation in Jesus is the New Covenant. I just don't think that, and people get caught up with, well, if you throw out part of the law, right? If you throw out the whole thing, if it's all or nothing, and that's what Rebekah would kind of argue. It's just like, I don't think that makes sense to me. You got to connect Jesus' teachings with what's intended. Like if you read the New Testament authors in light of what Jesus said, like you can watch my other video, it's like, people have this idea, and I think, sorry, I'm not being very precise. So many different people that preach certain things, and like the mantras you hear it, and I don't mean that necessarily disparagingly, just like I kind of do, I guess, sloganisms and stuff like we're not under the law of Moses. Well, that means different things to different people, but a lot of people will say that. And so the ideas get kind of intermixed, and we're all a big happy family of burnt nuts in a certain sense. I say that lovingly. Let's see, pulling up the verse here. Okay, here's one. This is basically the only thing I wanted to start the conversation with, and that's kind of the idea here. Is like so the kingdom of heaven. I'll put it on the screen. Gosh, I got to get organized. Let's see. By the way, check out Chris Date, just totally massacring Eternal Conscious Torment on Trinity Radio. They're still going right there. He's fantastic. Like, God doesn't burn people forever. Isn't that good news? The Bible doesn't teach that. Whoa, yay. It makes sense. The Bible actually is true. And it makes philosophical sense. I hate it because I do argue philosophically that Eternal Conscious Torment is ridiculous. And then people use that against me to say, well, yeah, but look, I'm dedicated to what the Bible teaches. That's why I go to church on Saturday, even though nobody else does. Well, I was born into it, so it actually, like, if the Bible taught Eternal Conscious Torment, I would have to swallow that pill, but it doesn't. That's the beautiful thing. And when you put in the time, when you actually put in the study time, and not, it's like, well, I just read the verse. It says eternal punishment. Yeah. Like, we know that. Don't assume things about why we believe what we believe because you think we're just being liberal or whatever. I did grow up in Seattle, so forgive me. But my church always taught that, and they're super conservative. So, and they got it from the King James Bible. No, but seriously, the Bible really doesn't teach Eternal Conscious Torment. It's when you realize how that's the case, when you study it, like the smoke of their torment. Here's one. The book of Revelation is based off imagery from the Old Testament. That's what it is. It's apocalyptic literature, and if you don't know the Old Testament, good luck understanding it at all. Okay, so that comes from, go read Isaiah 37 and then tell me if that looks like eternal conscious torment to you. I'll just say that. Okay, let me read this. I'll read the passage. Okay. The kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins. Is the kingdom of heaven for everybody who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom? Now, if this is talking about, I'll try not to give too much commentary, but if this was, I guess you could say the Jews are looking for their Messiah, right? Kind of. Well, usually when people talk about the Jews, the Israelis being the Jews as an ethnic group, which is fine, okay, but for the sake of this conversation, I'm not saying they're not the people who have a connection genetically to Abraham. I'm saying as a nation, though, they're not really looking for their Messiah per se, right? Now, 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. This is going to rub against some theology, I suppose. I don't want to say believers aren't believers, but who is this a warning to? Those who were foolish took their lamps. They're looking for the return of Jesus, I think, here. The Jews aren't looking, or that's an interesting question. Are the Jews looking for, in a sense they are, if they're looking for Messiah. So like, who is this intended to be speaking to? Unbelieving Jews? And what makes a Jew an unbelieving Jew? It's an interesting question as well. Just thinking out loud here. I think the entire Bible is to people who accept Jesus as the Messiah. I'll just say that, just kind of start with, is a proposition. I think so. Like people who go the route of saying this isn't a warning to believers and like Christians, that mindset often will take the book of Revelation and say, well, they have to say the first 3 chapters are to the church, right? Because it's plainly to the churches. But let me just consider a lot of this sort of theology that would disagree with me here. I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but people will say, because the first 3 chapters in Revelation are clearly to the church, right? Literal Christian churches that are established historically. So you can't get around that. But then they'll say the rest of the book is talking to the Jews. That's really problematic, because when you literally get to the end of this book, which has one author, he says, like the book, this is how the book ends. Listen to this. Oops. Jesus says, speaking to the churches, let's see. Where is it? Oh, yeah, right there, right. I, Jesus, sent my angel to testify to you these things in the churches. This is how the book ends. So now think about all the warnings through Revelation that are historically speaking of like a warning, which dovetails Jesus' teaching, which is what like when Peter says, I'll get back to the Matthew, but just think about this. Like, is this to Christians? Beloved, I write to you this epistle, and many in the last days will walk according to their own lust, saying, where is the promise of his coming? Who is that to? Is that to the world? I get it's kind of to the world, right? But notice how they acknowledge sort of the biblical account of the world in this warning. Oh, he's, and where's Peter getting this from? Is since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they did from the beginning. That's talking about the patriarchs. Notice they fell asleep, by the way, too. They're not, well, anyway. For these people who say this are willingly ignorant by the word of God. The heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of water, and in the water in which the world that then existed perished. So this is the thrust of Peter's writing. Jesus is the judge. God is long suffering, but he's coming back to be the judge. Here's another one that I want to throw these together before I read the text that I've been thinking about recently, just to keep in mind. This can rub people the wrong way, and I don't mean it to, but I think it's kind of plain. Like, I was bringing this up. It's like this is what I would say to people who say repentance isn't part of the gospel. I think it's necessary. I'm not really going after Rebekah necessarily here, by the way. I'm per se, like the title says, but just as a general sort of theology. Truly, this is them in the book of Acts, giving the Great Commission. I think this is when he's on Mars Hill here, is it? Yeah, to the unknown God. Truly, these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now commands all men everywhere to repent. Why? Because he has appointed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man who he has ordained. The man, when the man comes around. Right? He let it go for people in the Old Testament, but now, because of Jesus, he's not winking at the times. There is no times of ignorance anymore. Why? Because he's appointed this man, Jesus, to judge the world. And you can be assured of that. Why? Because he raised this man from the dead. And they said, we'll hear you on this matter again. But some mocked because they didn't believe the resurrection, right? Jesus is coming to judge the quick and the dead. And what does Jesus have to say about that? Is this for the Jews only? I mean, true believers, of course, don't have to worry, per se, right? So long as they hold fast. But Jesus talks about in Matthew 13, he's warning people to not. Well, here, let me go one more thing before I go back to the text here to make my argument. Don't be a hypocrite about judging, right? How does he kind of end this? Look, there's going to be ravenous wolves who I'll remind you were making the flock go astray. Read Psalm 119 when David's realizing how he's departed from the Lord, but he came back. He didn't give up. He kept believing. And what did that look like? All thy commandments are truth and righteousness. I meditate on your ways all the day long, right? That was what the call was in Deuteronomy 29 through 30. If you read that, it's a good place to go. Ravenous wolves come in and say, oh, it doesn't matter. We're good. We're covered in Abraham's sauce. Just do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. My master delayeth is coming. We can ease up and start what? Drinking with the drunkards and saying, my Lord delayeth is coming? What does he say to those people? Who are these people who slip out and deny the faith, deny the holy commandment, and return to their vomit, start drinking with the drunkards, if you will? What does that mean? I'm not saying drunk people are lost necessarily, but you get the point, right? They relax. They're like, chill, bro. It's all good. Everything's fine. Just do whatever. Jesus isn't going to come back and judge the wicked, right? That is the thrust of this idea here. Jesus isn't saying it's okay now. Just do whatever, right? You can just do whatever. Just say the magic words and you're good. No, we're being called to love one another, and you have to love, because if you don't love anybody, you have nothing. If you hate your brother, if you turn him over and all that sort of thing, then you have no eternal life dwelling in you. I never knew you. Depart from me, workers of lawlessness, who practice lawlessness. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine, notice this right here. So everybody hears it and does them. I will liken to a wise man who built his house on the rocks. Notice the rain descended, the floods came. This is going to go into my argument right here. Okay. Jesus says, he doesn't say, I never knew you, you who think you're saved by your works. You're not saved by your works. Don't misunderstand me. I'm just trying to say, what is Jesus saying here? He characterizes them as, so remember this, the lawless thing here. He characterizes them, not me. He doesn't characterize them, oh, look, when they say we did this and we did that, this is like, that's the things Judas did, but then Judas sold Jesus out. He's not saying they're bad because they did things in his name, because they served him. He characterizes them for you. They practice lawlessness, right? So remember that phrase there, practice lawlessness. That's why he doesn't know them. He says elsewhere in the parallel passages, I don't know where you've come from. I don't know you. He doesn't say I never knew you. He just says, I don't know you. Where do you come from? So this idea that he said, well, I never knew you, therefore everybody who honked for Jesus is saved, and he's not characterizing them as saying like not serving others. Okay. They're lawless, they're loveless. And so like when a relationship ends, this is compatible with my point is it's compatible with not being converted, and it's also compatible with, you know, obviously never having known the way of righteousness. But there's some who know the way of righteousness and then turn from the holy commandment and return like having been washed. Okay. They were washed and then they turn from it. And there's nothing left for them because there's only one way, and it's Jesus. So even if Hebrews 10 isn't about losing your salvation, the point is, if you know the way and you reject it, there's not another way for you. That includes people who never knew, perhaps, and people who did know. It seems that there's a quote unquote special place in hell for those who know the right way. I mean, because who's worse? I have more mercy for the people that never heard, that God's going to have more mercy for them because they didn't have the light shown. What about them? Oh, but you honked for Jesus and you knew the way of righteousness and rejected it, but you're good. But some guy over here isn't good, who never knew the way of righteousness in the same way you did. Look, that's why the teachers are judged more harshly, right? Because they know better. That makes you guilty. You're culpable. You're more culpable. What about the people who have less culpability? What about the mercy for them? That's how I'm coming at this. Anyways, therefore, so remember the lawless thing here, and I'll go into my argument. Whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them is the wise person. That's what you're supposed to do. Not just hear, not just listen, but listen and learn. Like, so you don't end up like the Pharisees, and so that you can't recognize who Jesus is when he shows up. And so you won't be drawn by the Father. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so why is this? Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine, this is the conclusion of the matter here, and does them, I will liken to a wise man who built his house on the rocks. Why? And the rain descended and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it didn't fall, and it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them, wow, is this works-based salvation? Will be a foolish man who built his house on the sand, and the rains descended and the flood came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Okay, so now into my argument. Matthew 25. The kingdom of heaven will be likened to 10 virgins. They went to meet the bridegroom. Now 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them. But the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. But while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight, a cry was heard, "Behold, the bridegroom is coming. Go out to meet him." So then this is really freaky, right? Because if it is talking about believers in Jesus, that's scary, right? It's kind of like people, there's just like Matthew 7, it seems like there's people who think they're serving God, but they're not in some way, in some sense. I'm not looking to condemn anybody in particular here. I'm just trying to be honest with the text. So, and some of them realized their lamps were going out because they didn't have enough oil. And they asked for more oil from the other virgins who had lots of oil, and they couldn't give it up for some reason. And so they go to try to get more oil, and they come back, and Jesus says, "I don't know you." And then Jesus says, "Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming." Now, here's my main argument here. Is the warning that Jesus is coming, we don't know when, but that it's imminent in the sense of that he is coming back and he is that judge of the world. Is that warning for everybody? Is this only to Jews? Now, what is the context here? I'm not looking at the chat if anybody's so sorry about that. I'm just trying to get through to make my point, my main point, which is this. How do you read Matthew 24? It obviously has context to the Jews and the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Don't get me wrong. I'm a tiny p partial preterist, because obviously this has to have context to the original audience first and foremost, right? But I'm sorry, Matthew 24 why does Matthew 24 have something to do with the second coming? Because Jesus is the man appointed to judge the entire world. And what is the world? Is it the local flood world that Moses knew about in the local flood? Okay, I don't mean to totally diss people who are old earth, not worldwide flood advocates, but I am that. And whatever your interpretation is of the flood, my point is, whatever the world is, I would argue it's that world which was flooded is that world which God created in the context of Genesis. So whatever that world is that God's responsible for creating is that world which Peter is saying overflowed with water. But even if you take it as a local flood, what's the application in Peter's mind? Well, this man, Jesus, has been appointed to what? To judge the Middle East or the little world that Moses knew about when he wrote the text. That may all be true, that Moses wasn't aware of the globe. I suspect he wasn't aware of the globe, okay? But he thought of it as the world which God created. And we all know that Jesus is coming back to judge everyone, the quick and the dead. And so the warning in Matthew 24 that goes into his teachings in Matthew 25 is a warning to the world that this man, Jesus, has come to judge humanity. The good, the bad, the ugly, the skinny, the fat, the ones who climb on rocks, all of them. And of course, God is the righteous judge that will judge fairly, and he'll judge according to the light people have. But this warning isn't just to Jews, right? This is Jesus talking about his coming. Every eye will see him. Don't be taken away by false prophets. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. This is the judgment of the entire world. So if you ask me, going into Matthew 25, this is talking about the second coming. And the days of Noah, remember, built his house upon the rocks, so that when the floods came and beat upon the foundation, only those with the sure foundation. Think of Matthew 13. But that hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days of Noah, they were eating and drinking, giving in marriage, saying peace and safety, peace, peace, but there is no peace. Until the day Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be. The two men will be in the field. The one taken here is the one taken in judgment. It's the ones that were left that were preserved. They were left in the ark. So he's taking this is what Peter's getting his teaching from right here, because Jesus is the rabbi. And so they're riffing off of what Jesus taught because he's the teacher. So that warning in 2 Peter 3, he's getting this from Jesus' teaching here. And Jesus is talking about that day when he's been appointed, the righteous judge on Psalm 82's of the gods, right? The Elohim. Jesus is the most high Elohim, who's come as our advocate and our intercessor and the one who takes on humanity in corruption to redeem it so that we can receive the inheritance purposed for us in God's original creation, which is to be restored. So the one taken, is that just Jews that aren't ready? Or is that humans who are appropriately judged? So I just would say this is for the Matthew 25 is for the purpose of the coming of Jesus. Look at here. So let me establish why I think there's no really other way to read that. And I'll close up here with this. Notice what also John wrote this. This dovetails with 2 Thessalonians as well. Jesus, the day of the Lord, is Jesus' second coming when he executes judgment. Notice this. 2 verses. This is the one who's causing problems from Daniel that Paul ascribes, and that the spirit of this person is working in the world already, but it'll come to a head and Jesus will interrupt that, right? Because all the tribes of the earth will mourn, right? We just read in Matthew 24. This way it said, all authority this is talking about the fourth, this is the Antichrist figure from Daniel 7. And you can see it in 2 Thessalonians 2 as well. I won't go there, but so speaking of that figure that comes out of the fourth kingdom in Daniel 2 and 7, it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation, all who dwell on the earth. will worship him, whose names were not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And of course, all those who worship the beast will be thrown into the lake of fire, says elsewhere. And notice what Jesus says about his coming at the end of the book here. Is this for just the Jews or is this for the Christians? Remember, we started here. Right before Jesus comes, this is what it said. He who is unjust, let him be unjust still. He who is filthy, let him be filthy still. He who is righteous. And forget about what exactly this means or looks like, but just think about what it's saying, and we can talk about the details of what it makes somebody filthy, what makes somebody righteous. The point is, Jesus is characterizing them. He declares, he who is filthy or unjust, let it be. And he who is declared righteous and holy, let that be. Let him be. Holy still. So something's declared about people. And then he says, Jesus' words, and behold, I'm coming quickly, and my reward is with me to give to everyone according to his work. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Think about that. Why is he saying that? This is separating the sheep and the goats. Of course, believers are sheep. Ones who God has mercy on are sheep. The point is, this is the final separation, I would argue, right? Because he's saying, I'm the beginning and the end. Why is he saying that? He's God. His reward is with him. Why? Because he's declared the separation, and then he comes and executes it, and that's what he teaches in Matthew 13. This is a final judgment. Jesus, that man who will judge both the quick and the dead. And I'll just say, blessed are those who do his commandments, for they will have right to the tree of life. So blessed are you because you work for your salvation, so that God will save you because you earned it. No, obviously he's not teaching that, right? But he does say, blessed are those who do his commandments, for they will have right to the tree of life. And they'll have right to enter into the city. My point is, I think the language here is just, the separation is declared, however you want to understand that, and it's a done deal. And so that's the warning of the Great Commission to the world. Jesus, the merciful God, Jesus, is coming back, and you need to choose salvation right now, today, because there's going to be people who miss out because they weren't ready. And I guess I'll throw one more in there as a good Adventist here. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven. This is a message going to the world with the everlasting gospel to preach to all who dwell on the earth, all humans, every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come. So this is a pre-Advent judgment. Sorry, it's just what the Bible teaches. It's a pre-Advent judgment. He interacts. He's interactive. He comes down and sees. He comes down to save. He's interactive. It's relational. He never executes judgment without declaring what's coming. And this is that declaration. So join me in declaring it to the world so that more people can be saved. Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come. I believe I'm fulfilling that right now. And worship him who made the heaven. Worship that creator God. Remember the Lord of the Sabbath? The one who was at the beginning, and he created our world. He made heaven, earth, the sea, and the springs of water. Babylon has fallen, and Jesus is coming to execute judgment on Babylon, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And then, of course, we have the warning, don't worship the beast and receive his mark, because if you do, you would make yourself not part of the Lamb's book of life, because the person who worships the beast will be thrown into the lake of fire, and they'll drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out in full strength into the cup of his indignation. And they will suffer second death, it looks like here. The fire and brimstone sort of Sodom and Gomorrah sort of thing here. And of course, this isn't eternal conscious torment, but it is final destruction. And you can see where this imagery comes from in Isaiah. I believe it's 37. Just read that chapter and you'll see that this is not eternal conscious torment, but it is final judgment. And it contrasts, again, like we just saw in Revelation 21, these people who are lost because they worship the beast. Then there's these other people. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. So I think the warning is universal, not to scare people, but just to give them the reality of what I think this is saying. But not to say you don't have assurance in Christ. You do, of course. But like, Jesus is the judge and he is coming back. And I would just ask you, are you ready? Do you know him?